This is the most dangerous election in Africa. Right now, in the heart of Mogadishu, a city synonymous with anarchy, citizens are lining up to cast ballots for the first time in over half a century. Somalia is attempting the impossible to resurrect democracy from the ashes of civil war. The government calls it a historic triumph. Al-Shabaab calls it a target. This isn't just about choosing local councillors. This is a direct challenge to the militants who have ruled by the gun for a generation. Some say this vote is a fragile miracle, the first real step toward a legitimate government. Others call it a cynical facade, a staged performance for foreign donors that changes nothing for the average Somali. Who's right? Tonight, we go deep into the chaos and the courage of Somalia's great democratic gamble. To understand why a simple local election is so explosive, you have to rewind the clock. Universal suffrage in Somalia died in 1969. That was the year a military coup ushered in decades of dictatorship, which then collapsed into the catastrophic civil war of 1991. The nation shattered. For over 30 years, the concept of one person, one vote was a forgotten dream. How do you hold an election when there is no state? For the past 2 decades, Somalia's government has been built through complex clan-based power-sharing deals. Presidents and MPs were chosen by just a few thousand clan delegates in fortified airport hangars. It was a system that created elites in bulletproof cars, completely disconnected from the millions struggling outside the gates. The key player pushing for change is President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud, now in his second non-consecutive term. His promise? To finally break the clan cartel and build a government with a real public mandate. The plan is a phased process. Step 1, these district council elections in the capital. Step 2, expand voting to other federal states. The ultimate goal? A direct, national, one-person, one-vote election for parliament by 2029. But the central tension is immediate and deadly. The militant group Al-Shabaab controls vast swathes of the countryside and has infiltrated the city. They have vowed to disrupt the apostate voting process with extreme violence. So the timeline is a race against terror. Can the state deliver a credible vote before the bombers strike? This is the controversy. Is this a genuine turning point, or a Potemkin village erected under the watch of African Union peacekeepers? Supporters of this process argue this is nothing short of a revolution. Proponents point out that for the first time in 54 years, over 30,000 registered voters in Mogadishu's 16 districts have the power to choose who represents them at the most basic, important level of governance. This isn't about the presidency. It's about who fixes the streetlights, who collects the garbage, who manages the local clinic. It's the foundation of accountable government. The strongest argument from this side is about legitimacy. For years, Somali politicians have been accused of being puppets of foreign donors, with no connection to their people. This process, however flawed, begins to change that calculus. As one government official told reporters, when a councillor knows they can be voted out by their neighbors, not just removed by a clan elder, their priorities shift to service delivery. This creates a direct line of accountability that has been absent for generations. Furthermore, supporters argue this is a devastating psychological blow to Al-Shabaab. The militants' entire ideology is based on the claim that the Somali government is an illegitimate foreign implant. But what happens when that government derives its power from the will of the people, expressed at polling stations? It undermines the jihadist narrative at its core. Every ballot cast is a rejection of their rule. The security forces are framing this as a battle of ideas, fought with voter ink instead of just rifle scopes. The international community, including the UN and major donors, strongly backs this view. They see it as the indispensable first step towards stability and a sovereign, functional state that can eventually stand without billions in peacekeeping aid. They point to the sheer logistical triumph, registering voters, setting up polling stations, training staff in a city that was a no-go zone just a decade ago. For them, the mere fact it's happening is a victory. But wait, there's another side to this story. But critics argue this is a brilliantly staged illusion. Opponents counter that calling this universal suffrage is a gross exaggeration. Let's look at the numbers. Mogadishu has an estimated population of 2.5 million people. Only 30,000 are registered to vote. That's roughly 1.2% of the city. Where is the universal in that? Skeptics point out that the registration process was opaque, limited to specific secure zones, and likely easily manipulated by the same powerful clans this system was supposed to bypass. The most damning criticism is about security and exclusion. To even register, you needed a government ID and to show up in person at registration centers. For millions of Somalis displaced by conflict, living in camps outside the city or in Al-Shabaab-controlled areas, this was an impossible barrier. This process effectively disenfranchises the most vulnerable, the very people whose lives are most impacted by bad governance. Furthermore, the threat of al-Shabaab violence means the campaign has been invisible. No public rallies, no door-to-door canvassing. How can you make an informed choice in a vacuum? Here's where it gets interesting. Many analysts and civil society activists see this less as a people's vote and more as a clan deal in new clothing. They argue the major clans have simply divided up the seats in advance, presenting hand-picked candidates to the public for a rubber stamp. The real bargaining, they say, happened behind closed doors, long before any ballot was printed. The election is just theater to legitimize the same old power-sharing arrangement. And then there's the cost. In a nation facing a devastating drought, with over 8 million people needing food aid, critics question the millions of dollars spent on this limited exercise. They argue the resources would be better spent on immediate humanitarian relief and building basic state functions, like a reliable police force, before attempting complex elections. For the average Somali staring at an empty bowl, a distant council election feels like a luxury they cannot afford, orchestrated by an elite they cannot touch. So who's right? Let's look at the evidence. Stepping back from the rhetoric, what does the data suggest? First, the security numbers are stark. According to conflict monitors, al-Shabaab attacks in Mogadishu have intensified in the months leading up to the vote, with a notable shift toward targeting government and electoral offices. This isn't speculation. It's a quantifiable escalation proving the group sees this process as an existential threat. Looking at the evidence from similar post-conflict transitions is sobering. Experts note that rushed elections in fragile states often exacerbate tensions rather than heal them. They can harden clan identities as groups vie for power, or create winners who take all and losers who reject the system entirely. The International Crisis Group has warned that without massive investment in civic education and truly independent election bodies, this phased plan could stumble. Financial evidence is also clear. Over 70% of Somalia's national budget comes from international donors. This election is largely funded by them. This creates a powerful incentive for the government to showcase progress, to keep the aid flowing, whether or not the progress is deeply rooted. Neutral analysts point out that the true test won't be election day itself, but what happens in the months after. Will the newly elected councillors have any real budget or power to deliver change? Or will they be sidelined by the entrenched central government? International comparisons are tricky but instructive. Kenya's own devolution process, launched with the 2010 constitution, shows that empowering local governments can dramatically improve service delivery. But it also shows it takes years, constant civic pressure, and fierce fights over resources. The data suggests Somalia is at the very, very beginning of that marathon. The evidence shows a process that is simultaneously a genuine, historic attempt and a deeply flawed, limited one. Both truths can coexist. The reality is more complex than either side admits. This is not a pure miracle, nor is it a total sham. It is a desperate, messy, and courageous experiment. What most people miss is the profound symbolism at play here. For a young Somali who has never known anything but war, clan patronage, or militant rule, simply seeing a polling station, a physical place where your voice is supposed to matter, is revolutionary. It plants a seed of an alternative future. The uncomfortable truth is that democracy cannot be delivered perfectly in a war zone. It will be imperfect, exclusionary, and vulnerable to manipulation. The critical question is whether this imperfect process creates a platform that citizens can later seize and improve. Does it create a crack in the system that allows light in? The phased approach is a recognition of that fragility. Trying to run a national vote tomorrow would be a disaster. This slow, district-by-district build-up is arguably the only feasible path. However, the government and its international backers must be held to account. If this process does not rapidly expand to include more voters, if the elected councillors are not given real power and budgets, and if the clan elites simply co-opt the new system, then the critics will be proven right. It will become a mirage. The verdict: this is a necessary first step, but it is only a step. Its success will be measured not by the peaceful conclusion of voting day, but by whether a citizen in Mogadishu 1 year from now feels their local councillor actually listens to them. So how does this affect ordinary people? Right now, for most, the immediate impact is more security checkpoints and fear of bombs. But the long-term hope is tangible. The hope that a local leader, chosen by the community, might finally fix the broken water pipe, clean the streets, and stand up to corrupt police. It's the hope for a government that serves, not just rules. What to watch for next is the expansion. The government has promised to roll this model out to other federal states like Hirshabelle and Galmudug later this year. That will be the real test. Can they secure voting in towns much closer to al-Shabaab strongholds? Also, watch the turnout numbers and any reports of voter intimidation or fraud. They will tell us if public faith in this process is growing or shrinking. Predictions are dangerous, but the trajectory suggests a rocky road ahead. Expect more violence from al-Shabaab. Expect disputes over results, but also expect a determined, if slow, push to widen the democratic circle. The genie of public participation, once let out, is very hard to put back in the bottle. So the central debate stands. Is Somalia's vote a historic dawn or a democratic facade? The answer will shape the future of the Horn of Africa. Now I want to hear from you. Are you team historic breakthrough or team democratic mirage? What do you think? Drop a 1 if you believe this is a genuine turning point, 2 if you believe it's a flawed facade. Let's debate in the comments. Share this with someone who needs to see both sides of this critical story. Subscribe to Kenya News Update today for more breaking news and deep dive analysis from across the region.